Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. I'm telling you what, my name is Stu Turley, and I'm the president and CEO of the Sandstone Group. And I am excited today. We have Tucker Perkins, and Tucker is the CEO and president of the Propane Education and Research Council. And we're going to talk about how to get to net zero and how we do it with our own U.S. energy. Tucker, thank you for stopping by the podcast.
Stu, thanks. It's a great conversation. I'm looking forward to having a great time with you today.
Give us a hair of a background on what the propane is all about in trying, because your propane, I loved your website. It's propane.com, I believe.
That's right.
How did you get that for a website?
Well, propane's been around about 120 years, so we just made sure we applied for it right when the web was invented. So it's not hard to do after that. We were thinking about a long time ago how to talk to people about the features and benefits of propane, but it's been interesting. Just the last 3 or 4 years, we now want to talk not about portability and versatility and economics, but now we kind of wrap all that in to talk about the environment. And a great way to do that is to drive people to propane.com where they can kind of learn at their own pace.
I'll tell you, that is so cool as far as that goes. And I'm sitting here thinking, one of my houses is in rural. No, it takes an hour for the police to get there. So it's like nowhere. And I've had propane tanks all along, and I love propane. But propane fits in a little bit more. Could you go into a little bit about what propane is to rural, as well as how good it is for the environment?
Well, certainly over the years, we've been thought of as the fuel beyond the natural gas mains, right? Not the fuel of the cities or urban areas, but the fuel of agricultural America and rural America, where natural gas didn't exist. That's partially true, and we certainly are a strong feature, as anybody in Texas understands. But go back to Winter Storm Uri, we certainly served people in Dallas, people in Fort Worth, people in Austin, and real rural community, real urban communities. We also continue to serve. I would say the propane has always been this cousin, if you will, to natural gas. If you had access to natural gas, you used it on the main. If you didn't, but you wanted the benefits of gas, you would use propane beyond the mains. Still probably the same logic, but I'd say it's kind of interesting that over the last 3 or 4 years, again, we began to think about a path towards decarbonization. And somehow or another, the narrative got around that this narrow path towards electrification, right? It's been a war of fossil fuels versus beneficial electrification. And as I'm quick to say, it's not a binary choice, right? Fossil fuels aren't clean or dirty. Certainly natural gas, propane, I would argue, are fairly clean. Electricity made from coal, oil, and wood, fairly dirty. Coal, oil, and wood, fairly dirty, right? So I'm out really trying to change the conversation. Not that we need to move away from a heavy emphasis on climate and health and justice, but let's move away from talking about fossil fuels are evil and electricity is good. And let's talk about how do we really get there at the fastest way and at a price we can all afford.
How do we, and your whole coalition is about getting the education for propane out there. And I just bought, and I'm going to be a testimony here. I just bought a generator that's big enough to run my cabins, and I've got it hooked up already to my propane. So I walk out, flip the switch, and I've got backup generator power. I love propane. How do we get propane? And where do we how can we get that story out there? Because it is so clean burning.
Well, Stu, I think that story gets told every day through people like you. And I think first off, I think the narrative changed just in the last 6 or 8 weeks as we see what's going on in Ukraine. We see now how Europe is responding to really a lack of energy independence, right? I could have told you 5 years ago that Europe's reliance on Russian natural gas was going to be problematic at some point in time. no way to envision ultimately what happened. But here we sit in the United States. We are the world's largest producer of propane by far. We're also the world's largest consumer, but Central America, South America, most of Asia, certainly a large part of China, much of Europe comes to rely on our propane as well.
Right.
Yet what people don't realize, when you really think about the full cycle, what it takes to find it, transport it, use it, and dispose of what's left over, propane is one of the lowest emitting sources of energy that we have today. And as you talk about in your generator, it's been a big change for us. Everybody thinks about propane in their backup residential generator, right?
Right.
Now you think about it even more because the electric grid has become less and less reliable for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
But
ERCOT
now
had that problem last year.
we're so far past these traditional uses of just how to use propane in your home to heat your water, cook your food, run a fireplace. Now we're talking a lot with people about how to use it in grid situations. How do we use it to shave peak off for your company, or maybe to have a base load and let the electric company provide the peak? So power gen is such a new and exciting use of propane. The bottom line is we have so much more supply than demand in the US. It is clean to store, clean to consume. And so we're really working hard. And that's really what I do every day, is work hard to find what are the best uses for this environmentally friendly, affordable fuel.
Boy, and when you take a look at the Biden administration and then COP26, and you take a look that now natural gas is accepted as a renewable for renewable funding, since propane is a close cousin to natural gas, you would think that propane would be right in that same group now. So do you think that we could get additional government funding and really go down that road to try to say, hey, propane is a good source to get this extra renewable funding?
Well, it's interesting. As we work inside Department of Energy, there are many people inside the Department of Energy, inside California Air Resources Board, inside labs and universities across the country who see that very truth, right? That low carbon, easy to transport fuels with easily renewable counterparts are a part of the solution going forward. And so I never know which politicians get it or which ones don't, as I see some of the policies being contemplated and frankly, the funding that follows it, right? One of the things that probably troubles me the most about this whole energy conversation is not about the technologies they're working on, but the cost that it would cost to bring them to the market, and who pays for those solutions, right? I mean,
consumers.
As we think about some of that, people so often say, well, we must do this in the name of social and environmental justice. And I'm thinking, these solutions are not going to benefit those people, right? These people need better healthcare, better education, better highways, better, public transit systems. That's how you benefit, society. And here we offer this clean fuel, domestic fuel, affordable fuel with not a lot of public investment. And the phrase, we say in the United States, this transition, and actually I use the word transformation because transitions imply smooth.
That is good.
Transformation certainly implies bumpy and hurt, and some people left behind and some people bleeding and wounded. But this transformation could be 25
missing an arm,
to 30
missing a leg.
Well, the transformation is $25 to $30 trillion. As preposterous as that sounds, Bank of America finally sanctioned that number. And they said the worldwide transformation to a cleaner grid looks like $150 trillion. Think about how better life would be for everyone if we redeployed that money into true infrastructure, true housing, true medicine. And so that's the story. First off, we try to study it every day and see, are things changing? They give us a different end view. But in today's language, at least, we see that these abundant domestic fuels like propane certainly have a seat at the table.
I'll tell you, what's kind of concerning is, and it's sad, is the political ramifications of not building pipelines. We have the Marcellus up in Pennsylvania that has all the gas that we could possibly use back east. And we just put one day away, one pipeline away. Right now, they have to bring in LNG from Russia, Norway, and one of the African imports. So it's Russia, Norway, and one other. And it would be so nice to use the US Marcellus gas up there in Pennsylvania and then turn that into US gas and US propane up there to get it lower cost. How is the propane made up in that part of the world, up in the East Coast area? Where's the sourcing for it?
So it is interesting that you call out. We're going to back up to that a bit eventually,
okay, cool.
Because it's not just about pipelines, right? One of the things that strikes me is people aren't really willing to build any of the infrastructures that it takes to deliver a cleaner climate. So you focus on pipelines, which I love because they're once built, they're out of sight, out of mind, safe, inexpensive transportation. But a power line is not much more than an overhead pipeline. And there's case after case now where those are not being able to be permitted either. But the answer to your question is the propane in America comes generally from the cleaning up of natural gas. So, you live in Texas, you certainly have this prolific shale play, but then as we all know, Texas has this abundance of energy, right? You think about the Northeast and you correctly say the Marcellus shale, which is liquid rich, meaning full of natural gas and full of natural gas liquids like propane. Yet the barriers to get that moved into the Northeast, particularly, they just keep denying pipeline after pipeline. Now, propane, fortunately, stores easily, and you can put it in a rail car, you can put it in a truck, but nothing compares to the safety, the out of mind of a pipeline. And just think about the benefits of taking trucks off the road, taking rail cars off the railroad, and transporting energy underground, out of sight, out of mind safely. But I was reading some work today of Robert Bryce. Robert Bryce is quick to point out that I think 386 wind sites have been denied permitting, and that it seems to continue to just be not only not in my backyard, but not in your backyard either, right? Don't build this nuclear plant, don't build this wind farm, don't build this pipeline, don't even build this overhead power line.
But
Tucker, I do think it's something that we have, as we all wrestle with what does the energy system of the future look like? The one thing I see nobody ever thinks about are these human factors like that. Can we in fact permit these solutions? Can we afford them? Are there minerals and mining that give us the things they need to be in place? And so often I find the answer is no, no, and no.
I'll tell you, I kind of teed you up with some of that because I know you and I love pipelines, but I think propane, in my estimation, is probably the bridge between natural gas and politics, is the way I look at propane. Because we already have the rail cars. We already have everything that we have got to focus on propane. I'm sorry for being a propane cheerleader, but I'm over here going, man, it is great. We need to see if we can get to the political folks and get more propane up to our East Coast to get them off of Russian LNG. I mean, this is just crazy to me.
Well, I'm always impressed when people know that story, right? Because that's what's going on in the Northeast. No, I don't want to permit more pipelines. So the natural gas, but I don't want to stop the growth. And so more people move in. They don't have access to reliable natural gas. They can't access a lot of other forms of energy. Even electric lines are taxed there. So what is the next thing they do? You've already called out one. They bring in Russian LNG. And I might argue LNG in America is at least found and handled in very environmentally safe ways. I
Right.
would argue, just from seeing some of the stories, Russian LNG, not so much, right? So they are deferring a domestic sound environmental choice for a foreign non-environmental sound choice.
Right.
Another good example, because there are inadequate facilities, when the power lines need more power,
Right.
they often turn to diesel fuel to be the
Right.
backup generating source, horrifically dirty, right? So it's,
Yep.
none of that is benefiting the climate, none of it. And none of it is bringing us a reliable system as well either. So everywhere you turn, the story just has gaps. And I think, to your point earlier, this abundance of propane, this abundance of natural
Right.
gas, they have a key role in decarbonizing now at
Right.
prices we can afford.
Now, when you take a look at the California mix, and I don't know the California propane mix, and California, their last 5 years was 25% of their oil was imported from Iran. Iran was sanctioned by the US last time I checked, and they're still importing oil from a US sanctioned area. They're also importing oil from the rainforest. They're the largest importer of crude oil, but yet they have one of the biggest complete oil area and reserve there in California. They only have one nuclear plant. They have all the solar and everything else. But do you know the propane status, or can we get them more propane there? What's going on with propane in California? I don't know that answer.
Yeah, California is a state that we actually can get a lot of propane into it. And
Nice.
there's been a lot of reliance, again, mainly for the agricultural communities, and then to a degree for material handling. But I will tell you, today, as we work, particularly in California, we're thinking about even the ports, right? The ports, intensely busy, heavy reliance on diesel fuel. And just to make these easy steps to migrate them from diesel fuel to propane, whether it's to power trucks or material handling,
Right.
or some of those heavy cranes you see, and then even to use propane to produce power for some of the equipment there, it
Right.
would clean the air quickly, and really lower the price of cargo handling into the US. We're working that story now. There's going to be a major announcement of some new propane powered equipment into some of the California ports. And we're looking forward to
Go
really
ahead.
being able to
Nobody,
tell that
we
story.
won't tell anybody if you go ahead and give us
Well,
a
we're
early
waiting,
release.
but I mean, again, it's at some level you might say, well, propane must have been a last ditch effort for them. And I think the truth is, natural gas just really doesn't have the energy density to do the job sometimes.
Right.
There's not available electricity in volume, much less in cleanliness. And
Right.
so there's a perfect example where California sees propane as a reasonable choice. We can afford it, we can get it into the state, and when we use it, it lowers our carbon footprint.
And propane is so much easier to transport than LNG. You got to keep LNG cold. And propane.
So actually I came from the LNG world, so I'm quite familiar with it, but that's the key difference. In fact, I laugh sometimes. I was on an innovation group that we were really thinking about how to clean shipping when there had to be a better fuel for ships than bunker fuel.
Right.
And when it came to discussing propane, I said, I think LNG will be the dominant fuel for shipping worldwide. Right. And frankly, I think I'm wrong. I think propane, or LPG as we know it in many other countries, because it's so much easier transported, so much easier to bunker. So perhaps in major ports like Singapore or Hong Kong, there's plenty of LNG, but when you move to any of the second tier ports,
right,
they don't have access to those facilities. And so now we see shipping's making a fairly major migration from bunker fuel to propane for that very reason.
Let me ask, this is kind of a geopolitical kind of thing, because we know the Putin is a horrible idiot. And I just wrote a paper on LNG. Can we replace all of natural gas in Europe using America's LNG? And I wrote no, because it takes so long to put a degasification center in and billions of dollars. What about propane? I mean, I don't know the answer there, but do you think you can't transplant it enough? But when you take LNG, can you turn it into propane when you're releasing it or degasifying it?
Well, actually, you can take propane and make it look like the equivalent of natural gas. And we do that through utilities and industrial facilities all over the country today.
Right.
So particularly for interruptible natural gas, right? The logical thing for utilities that are running low on natural gas is to use propane and air mixed together to make what we would tend to call substitute natural gas. So I would say in Europe, I think I love the fact that you're even thinking about these and writing papers on it.
Right.
Because I think in Europe, we'll see a combination of more American LNG.
Right.
I hope someday in Europe, we talk a little bit more about conservation than we talk about today, and efficiency gains in technology. And I think we'll see, and we're already seeing some propane going over, but more importantly in Europe, they're on the cutting edge now of these renewable feedstocks, both renewable natural gas and renewable propane. In fact, our World Association, we talk about 50% of the world's demand can come from renewable sources as early as 2040. When we said that statement 2 or 3 years ago, it wasn't perfectly rooted in fact. It was generally assumed that we could do it. But as I sit here today, I am sure that we can exceed 50% of the world's supply from renewable sources in just 15 years or so. So I would say this, as we think about other developing countries, Africa is the one that comes to mind. I see Africa developing much more using propane from the beginning rather than relying on natural gas.
Because the transport,
partially because of its ease of transport, whether it's by ship or rail or truck. So we develop the coast. We want to move 100, 200 miles inland. I think we're going to see, particularly the African continent, developed much more using propane solar, propane wind combinations.
You know, we need to use all forms of energy to elevate the population out of poverty. We need to do it with the best economy, but we also need to have the lowest cost kilowatt per hour to the consumers and take care of the environment. Because if we have high electricity, like we now have in the East and in Germany and in California, the end users pay for that. And
Absolutely.
We got to get it the lowest cost. And I love the idea of the propane in Africa, because that makes a really good story of being able to have both wind and solar and propane.
Well, I love the fact that you are marrying these concepts that seem to be, disparate and disconnected from so many people, right? But the cost of energy, the ability to pay for energy is directly related to the quality of the life you live, right?
Absolutely.
It's directly related. So let's envision solutions, but they must be affordable to be able to be implemented, right? And secondly, they do need to be good for the climate. I'm always quick to say they also need to be good for your health. It's one of the reasons I love the story around ports and propane, because ports are probably, this easy to visualize industrial facility where people of the least means to live elsewhere surround the port. So when you clean up the air in the port, you immediately benefit everyone in the communities that touch the port. You immediately benefit everybody whose goods and services come through that port. I mean, I love the conversation I had with Amazon a few years ago. They're like, oh, we want to really be all in hydrogen, until they realize that hydrogen might cost them $10 to $12 a gallon gasoline equivalent. And they're like, well, we can't afford to deliver packages at $10 or $12 a gallon gasoline equivalent.
Right.
So there's a direct connection between energy, quality of life.
Right.
By the way, your own industrial productivity, right? We see it in Germany
Yep.
now. BMW is like, I'm not sure I could produce the cars that we've produced here since the beginning of BMW
Right.
at the price of electrical energy that we have to pay for.
Right.
Is it conceivable that BMW must leave Germany to get reliable and affordable electricity so we can
Right.
make reliable and affordable cars? It's all so linked. And then
Right.
lastly, for me, I never talk about climate without talking about health, right? I want
Right.
because I'm as important as we all have come to believe in, you know, temperature rise.
Right.
I'm quick to say asthma, bronchitis, COPD, health will affect us long before
Right.
adaptation to climate will.
You know, I'm just so excited. I think I can be one of your biggest cheerleaders out here.
I
Going,
think you
"Yay!"
already are.
I'm like, yay, propane. But now here's where we have some fun. And that is we have two podcast hosts because Tucker, you have your own podcast. Tell me about what you got going on. And the name of your podcast, I believe, is
Path to Zero.
I love
Path to
it.
Zero.
Boy, that was a good tee up.
It's lovely because first off, as people don't know me, but they would eventually realize I'm not going to sell anyone propane. I'm not going to call on you and ask you. I am in this conversation because we really are trying to see how to engage best in this conversation around clean climate, around
Right.
America's interests, and my focus. While I can talk about stories in Africa and Asia and certainly Europe, my focus is in the United States. That's what the Propane Education and Research Council is tasked to think about.
Right.
So on the podcast, and I think we just finished podcast number 42. So
Nice.
you know, we've had a good run. We have a whole host of different people, whether it be climatologist, one of our favorites, Catherine Hayhoe, who really is one of the brightest minds around climate,
Nice.
and how that relates in terms of meteorology.
Right.
We talk about carbon capture, and we've had some great guests to talk about the energy condition as it exists. May or may not have anything to do with propane or natural gas. We're talking about how do we in fact begin to achieve what we all want to achieve, which is getting on this path to zero.
How cool is that?
I find a lot of times today the narrative are around solutions that may be able to be offered 3 decades out.
Right.
At a cost likely we couldn't afford, and at a federal investment that we just don't really have the ability to make those investments. And so we're trying to bring this conversation back. Total agreement with let's clean the air. Let's make the climate better. Let's be in accord with making the world a better place to live. But let's do it in logical ways. And where we can, let's do it faster. It was a novel concept, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, but now I see so many people talking about what you just said earlier. Yep. What is the wider path to decarbonization? I'm quick to say people are always look for a silver bullet, and this doesn't have a silver bullet. At best, we have silver buckshot, and I think at one point, propane is one element of that silver buckshot.
Oh yeah, I like silver buckshot. You know, when you got a werewolf full moon, you got to have that silver buckshot. But I like the silver buckshot when you're sitting there and you're talking about nailing down into carbon net zero. Absolutely love getting into that path. With the taking a look at where you're going, you've got a nice staff. You've got on the propane.com, you've got a fantastic group of leaders. You're the president and CEO. What is your staff doing? What is going on with your staff right now? And what do you got going on for this year?
Well, so I am proud of our staff, and we've really pivoted over the last couple of years. Now we have, I think, 3 PhDs, 2 of which do nothing really but model emissions and think about the energy, the
Nice.
story of the future. But I would say we've always been heavily invested in technology, right? We've
Okay.
always believed that we need to offer solutions that are so superior, whether it's for durability or cost effectiveness, the solution. So, we're a part of the on-demand water heaters, right? Renai and that style water heater. We're kind of now producing 95% furnaces. We've actually got an ultra low NOx burner to go
Nice.
in residential stoves. We're bringing out to market in partnership with Cummins, an engine that is so superior to today's technology, it's mind-boggling, right? Not only more power and torque than anything we've seen before
Right.
in a 6.7 liter engine, but 25% reduction in greenhouse gases from the next best technology, right?
Cummins,
The last
Cummins
thing we're
engines
working on.
are huge. They are great. That's a great manufacturer of heavy equipment and heavy generators.
And it's so exciting to see them begin to embrace this wider path, right?
Isn't that great?
It was diesel. Maybe 100 years from now, it'll be hydrogen or something we're not even talking about. But
Right.
as we start where we are and look to where we need to go, engines powered on propane represent A, cleaner, B, affordable, and C, more important, deliver the goods and services that people need to have delivered to their homes, to their
You bet.
business. So we've always been these technologists, and we continue that. The last thing our staff is doing is we're really working hard to create, not just envision, but create these renewable forms of energy
Right.
that would arguably, one of the fun things for us is not only do we model the electric grid today, and I don't think people realize it, but propane today is cleaner than electricity in 75% of the country already. So as
I would
people
argue
think
world.
about, well, the only path to clean the climate is to electrify, in fact, that's quite incorrect. The cleaner path would be
Right.
to use less electricity and
Right.
use more low carbon fuels like propane, right?
Right.
But we agree that that story won't always be true, right? Hopefully the grid will be cleaner.
Right.
But our final scenarios are around, can we in fact use renewable fuels,
Right.
lower carbon than propane today?
Right.
And one of the interesting scenarios that we work out is in every situation for the work we're looking in, transportation, heating your house when it's cold, heating your water so it's
Right.
warm, cooking your food, using renewable fuels, our carbon intensity is lower than that of the grid, even in its optimum state of the future. So it's
Wow.
a fascinating story, and that is exactly what our staff is doing: is A, studying the story,
Right.
B, changing the conversation, and then C, trying to enter it so we're really seeing that we tell the story.
So who is your target base, Tucker, when you're out espousing the greatness of propane? Who are you? What's your market? Who are you trying to hit? You said you don't sell anything as far as that, and you're just trying to educate people. Who are you trying to reach?
Well, certainly informed consumers. We love
Okay.
talking to the public. And because I love the informed public, they
Right.
really want to learn more. We are literally a place that they can go and learn more, right? So
Right.
we certainly spend a lot of time talking with manufacturing partners,
Right.
Cummins, Toyota, John Deere. I mean, all these people that make the equipment of today and tomorrow, we're working with them routinely on making sure that their solutions work. And then lastly, people who are thinking about policy, whether it's foundations and universities, governments, we're at least trying to provide them. Now, we're not lobbying the government, but we're certainly trying to put the information out there so people can see it. But
Right.
in a word, we love talking to informed consumers.
I'll tell you, everybody is out there saying, ESG, and I don't think, and I can barely spell it, but I don't think a lot of people really understand, it's environmental, it's social, and it's governance. And now that natural gas is under that umbrella of available, boy, I can't wait to talk to some folks and say, hey, wait a minute, propane needs to be tagged in here as ESG. It
Yeah, it
truly
is interesting. While propane and natural gas are very linked, environmentally, we are distinctly different in one area.
Okay.
Propane, unburned propane,
Right.
does not has a global warming potential of 4, one of the lowest
Did you say
global
4?
warming potential. Yeah, 4.
Okay.
So a lot of refrigerants now are moving from offensive materials to propane because propane has such a low global warming potential.
Nice.
It doesn't have the ability to interact as a greenhouse gas if it leaks. Now, the other thing about the propane industry, we really strive for zero leakage.
Right.
It's always been a part of us. But it is interesting to see the opportunities for propane in front of us, again, beyond natural gas mains,
Right.
or in urban applications to drive transportation, to drive
Right.
material handling, to produce power. So many niche applications that it's really exciting. And as you correctly said, sitting in Dallas, I know you know this, but this domestic fuel, this domestic affordable clean fuel.
You know, if I bought a Tesla, I believe I would make sure that it was sitting into my tied into my generator running propane, because by the time you pull energy off of the grid, you're paying an extra $3,000 to $4,000 a year just to charge that Tesla, and everybody thinks that it's free because you're plugging it into the wall. I think I'll just run it off my generator.
Well, I think so many people think about it. It's one of the myths that we love to try to dispel. Everybody thinks because I buy an electric car, and if you want to drive an electric car, it's fine, but to call it emission free is just so incorrect. I mean, right? It is exactly as dirty as the electric grid from which you charge it, right? And I think that's one of the things that we really favor. This full economic cycle is what we tend to think about it. But you know, what happens from the time you started looking, in this case, from minerals, metals, processed it, turned it into a battery, get that battery in, charge it, produce power. Right. I mean, in many cases, that whole process is not very clean today. And now that we talk about energy security, I'm always reminded of something Scott Tinker said. Scott Tinker is the Texas State geologist, right? But he also is really one of the most brilliant people I've worked with about minerals and metals. And he said to me, I think 3 years ago now, America traded reliance on OPEC for energy independence. Right. We are now getting ready to hand that away to China as we think about a reliance on, as we move from a liquid society to a metal and mineral society, right? And he's exactly right. He's exactly right. He is. And I'm going to take it one notch further than that, Tucker. I think we're going to lose they're going after Saudi Arabia, and Russia and China are going to take it to the next level, and they're going to try to replace the dollar, going to the world being put on the yen. So I think that minerals issue, we're going to see it fighting up. And so your friend, he nailed it correctly, but it's also going to get notched up into that monetary issue where it's going to destroy the dollar. I definitely think that one of the things we're seeing today from Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a much bigger issue than I think, at least I originally thought. It is much bigger, and we have to think about, you know, countries like Russia, like China, to a degree like India, that, you know, may or may not have been aligned with us politically, economically. Right. And we really need to rethink some of this whole migration and this transition to energy. And sadly, I don't know that America will ever be able to be a mining place, right? Going back to your original conversation around permitting pipelines, it also applies to permitting industrial facilities. Intensely, you know, dirty for consuming water and land and energy. And so I think we in many cases, we won't accept that. Which is one reason, actually, one of my podcast guests had been into the Congo, had gone down into the lithium mines.
Wow.
And the storytelling out of that is incredible. And I think
Right.
if Americans really knew what was going on as we think about mining lithium,
Right.
it's not unlike some other stories they have about, where did your jeans come from, or how was your
Right.
shirt made? It's got an ugly underbelly every now and then.
It's really sad about the humanitarian aspect of like what you said up there with the Russia not taking care of the environment when they're drilling out of the polar cap, and then you take a look at the humanitarian issue of the lithium mines. Oh, I
Right.
bet that was horrible.
Yeah, it just makes, I think for me, it makes me just want to rethink the narrative, right?
Right.
The current narrative around electricity is clean, it's the thing of the future, and there really is no other choice.
Right.
And to rethink that narrative that perhaps energy security and energy
Right.
independence are important, affordable solutions are important, as is climate, health,
Right.
and justice. And I think they're all so wrapped. And as you have said a couple times on this, you want to be Propane's cheerleader, and I encourage you to be that. But
Yeah.
truly, when you think about how do you ring the bell in every one of those categories,
Right.
using domestic fuels like propane ring the bell.
Great way to say it. I like the way you say that. What's next? We've talked about where you're going with your podcast. We've talked about you're in season 3. You're hitting that 50 mark coming up, which is very good. Tucker, what's next for you coming around the corner?
I'm just out there continuing to tell the story. Now, the good news is the people behind me were continuing to try to find the next breakthrough in
Right.
another engine technology or another better way to produce power in partnership with sun and wind.
Right.
But I'm out there telling the story. And the good news is I'm encouraged now that, all of a sudden the story is beginning to be told in a little broader way, right?
Right.
Maybe this path towards this narrow path towards electrification isn't the best path. Maybe
Right.
it's not the fastest path. Maybe there is a better way to get there. And, we work with a lot of smart people, and I key off them. I mean, I look at Robert Bryce, who is, so focused on, how do we get nuclear power back into this conversation?
Right.
I'm very focused on how do we bring low carbon fuels and their renewable counterparts,
Right.
like propane, renewable propane, natural gas, renewable natural gas. How do we get back in the conversation?
Well, this is cool. Thank you. I just had so much fun today. And so, two podcast hosts were walking into a bar. We'd have to come up with some kind of joke, because I thoroughly enjoyed having you on here as a guest on the Energy News Beat. And I do appreciate
Well, I just love even how you think about the issues. I feel like if everybody framed the issues the way you framed them, we'd be in a different spot today. And I think the sad news is we'd be on a faster path to a cleaner climate. So I just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. And I'm just glad to be a partner with you in so many of those areas.
I care about the disproportionately impacted, the homeless, the poor, and the consumers get it in the energy policy. They just get run over in the environment by forcing your way one way or the other. Doesn't do anybody any good. Let's group therapy hug. Let's get a nice, happy plan, and let's work together. And I really think that, Tucker, you're leading the charge as well, educating out there. So thank you very much for your time, Tucker. And we're going to have all your contact, all your company information, and how to get a hold of you as well, too.
Well, I've loved my time with you, and I will keep enjoying reading your writings and encourage you to keep on doing it.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, dude.